Today on History's Tech, we are looking at the aircraft that would get the United States one step closer to the P-47 Thunderbolt. We're looking at the Republic P-43 Lancer. While this aircraft did have superior high altitude capabilities and long range capabilities, it had a rather short career, but it was a major stepping stone for the development of the P-47. Now, the story of the P-43 does continue with Alexander Kartveli, who very famously made the predecessor for the P-43, the P-35. And the development of the Lancer actually came after Seversky Aircraft changed their name to Republic, and they started doing a series of private developments of their own aircraft, the P-35. Each of these had different power plants and enhancements, and they went through a different series, one of them being this, the XP-41. Now, the most important of these prototypes was known as the AP-4, and the AP-4 incorporated a fully retractable landing gear, flush riveting, and most significantly, a new Pratt & Whitney R1830 with a turbo supercharger that was being developed for the B-17 Flying Fortress. Now, the AP-4 and the XP-41 were basically the same aircraft with some differences in their props and their engine cowling. And in March 1939, the AP-4 caught fire during a test and the pilot had to bail out. However, despite the loss, the United States Army Air Corps liked this turbo supercharged AP-4 demonstrator and ordered 13 more, designating them the YP-43. The 13 prototype YP-43s were quickly delivered to the Army Air Corps, and while they did exceed their initial trials, basically they were obsolete by the time they were delivered to the Army Air Corps. They lacked maneuverability, armor, and self-sealing fuel tanks that were becoming standard for aircraft. So instead of going ahead and continuing development of this aircraft, the Army Air Corps decided to go with another new aircraft Republic was developing by Kartveli, the P-47. And so this could have been the end of the P-43. However, there was a lot of development delays with the P-47. So needing a new aircraft immediately, the Army Air Corps went ahead and ordered 8 P-43A models with a new Pratt & Whitney R2180 that increased the aircraft's performance, giving it a much more comparable rating. And this initial run of the 80 P-43As could have been the end, but the Army was interested in a variant of the AP-4 prototype known as the AP-4J and was going to call this the P-44 rocket. However, once again, the Army figured the design was obsolete and canceled it and went back to working on the P-47. However, again, the P-47's new engine was not ready, so they went ahead and started producing even more P-43s. By the end of 1942, 272 P-43s had been built as a stopgap measure until the P-47 was ready. Now, the first group to actually receive the P-43 was actually the American Volunteer Group with the Flying Tigers in China. And they actually noted that these aircraft had good high altitude performance when compared to the Curtiss P-40, a good roll rate, and a radial engine without a vulnerable liquid cooling system. And the AVG actually asked their leader, Claire Chennault, to actually keep a few P-43s, but because they lacked the armor and self-sealing fuel tanks, they were relegated to more of a training duty than an actual combat aircraft. And they saw very limited service after flying with the Flying Tigers, mainly due to the fact that the Japanese realized that they were easier to shoot down due to their fuel tanks not being able to seal, and the engines being needed for the Douglas C-47. So the aircraft were kind of removed from Army Air Corps service, and eventually the Army Air Forces service as well, and they were relegated to mostly photo reconnaissance, but a few were loaned to the Royal Australian Air Force. After this, the aircraft was essentially retired. So its entire career was summed up in about 3 years. Now, if you would like to see a P-43 to this day, unfortunately, the only place you're going to be able to see it is in photos, as there are no surviving aircraft in the world, although there have been reports of a few parts found here and there. But there you have it, a quick look at an aircraft that had a lot of potential, but came at the wrong time. It was obsolete by the time it was finished, and the only reason it went into production was so that the next aircraft in the line, the P-47 built by Republic, would have enough time to be built to where it needed to be for combat duty. And had the P-43 not been there, Republic would have had to shut down its production lines and would have lost out on money and employees. So the P-43 was a saving grace for Republic as a company. But that's it for today. I thank you for joining me, and I look forward to talking to you on the next time.